Oh, hello there. I'm Toni Kola, the ACT's top drag scientist. In my years as a queer human and a science queen, I've learned a thing or two about sex. And today, thanks to Inspiring Australia, Phish and Phreak Productions, and National Science Week, I'm going to be imparting that knowledge onto you. So, welcome to Sex Ed Part 2, the remix. Just like any sex ed class, we're going to start off with a little bit of basic human anatomy. But before we do, let me just say that every body is a little bit different. Just like everyone has different skin, hair, eyes, and booties, everyone's anatomy and sex organs are a little bit different as well. Now, most people will either have a penis and scrotum or a vulva, but every single person's genitals are uniquely their own. Now, when you were born, you were likely assigned a sex, male or female, based on your sex organ. However, that doesn't necessarily say anything about your gender identity. Some people's assigned sex and gender identity are pretty much the same thing, or in line with one another at least. These people are called cisgender, cis being a Latin prefix meaning on this side of. Sometimes though, the sex someone is assigned at birth doesn't match up with their gender identity. These people are called transgender, trans being a Latin prefix meaning on the other side of. Other people have sex anatomies that don't fit the assigned sex format of male and female. These people may be described as intersex. There are lots of different combinations of body parts and hormones that fall under the intersex umbrella, but being intersex doesn't necessarily have any connection to a person's gender identity at all. But your junk doesn't make up your whole identity. Whether you identify as male, female, or non-binary, you may also identify as gay, lesbian, straight, bisexual, asexual, pansexual, demisexual, or whatever you want really. Your sexuality, like your body, is yours, and you can identify however best suits you, whether that's by gender identity or by your sexual preference. Now for this next segment, I've asked for a little bit of help from one of my dearest friends. Everyone, please welcome Layla Bounds!
Yay!
Thank you so much for coming and helping me out.
Thank you for having me. I've always loved talking about the vagina.
Oh. Well, fortunately, I also have a penis.
Oh, that's awful. No.
Horrendous. We're going to be talking a little bit about your general physical anatomy. So we're going to start off with Layla and her lovely pussy.
Aww. So much. Yeah, so I have a lovely vagina here. Although we refer to it as a vagina when actually the entirety of this is referred to as a vulva.
Really?
Right? Yeah. So if you hear me say vulva, I'm talking about the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Alright, so we're going to break down, well not physically, what we have here that you can see. And then we'll talk about the other bits
a little bit later
on. So what we have here is we have something called the pubis mons up top. This is where you've got a little bit of fat tissue. And if you're curious, right above that you do have some fat tissue over a uterus area as well. So you're not fat, you've got a usual pouch that everyone should have. Oh, yeah. This is where you grow your pubes, but I think we'll talk about that a bit later. We also have labia majora, literally big lips. So like yours, yeah, look at those majora. Oh, you also have labia minora. Now, I want to say that they're on the inside. They're certainly a little bit more tucked in, but not for everybody. In fact, often they're sticking out.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like to say hello. Yeah.
Like we'll probably be saying a lot, everyone's body is a little bit different, especially when it comes to your own junk.
And most of them are uneven. And the more that they're sticking out, the more likely you're going to have some discoloration. So if they're sticking out, there's a good chance that they'll be darker. Yeah. So we have majora, minora, and then we can move into a little bit more of my favorite area. So we have...
Oh, she's sparkly.
She's sparkles. Not in real life. So if you have a clitoris, congratulations. Sorry. If you have a clitoris, congratulations. It's one of my favorite things. And I'm going to tell you exactly where it is so no one has any excuse. It is directly above the urethra. That is where the wee comes out. And it is directly underneath where your minora meet and your majora up top. Huh. Yeah. And it is only a really small percentage of your clitoris.
Really?
Yeah. On most people, everyone being different, on most people it's about a fifth of the entirety of the clitoris. And this bit here is called the glans. Just like
so where's the rest of it?
Tucked away, and it is different. On most people, you will have two sides, I suppose, coming down, and they are internal. And they're what determine whether or not somebody might be able to orgasm from penetrative sex or not as well.
Oh, wow.
Depending on where they're situated. Yeah. So we have the clitoris, and it's the clitoris, the minora, and the majora. Everybody in the vulva gets swollen when somebody is sexually stimulated.
Love that.
Yeah.
I suppose I've got such a meaty tuck at gigs.
So another thing to note when you're looking at a vulva is that you'll have areas that are covered in skin that you would recognize on the rest of your body, and areas that are a little bit pinker or darker, obviously depending on your skin tone. And those are the bits that are further in. They're a special sort of skin. They're a mucous membrane, and they have special cells behind them, and that's what's keeping your vulva lubricated.
Wow.
Yeah, and you want it to be lubricated.
Oh, yeah. Who doesn't love a little bit of lube?
No one wants a dry minge except Ben Shapiro. Who said that? Cool. So my next favorite bit outside of the clitoris for me personally is something called the introitus.
The
I know,
introitus?
sciencey
I
word.
love a good
Does
Latin
that
word.
get you wet?
A little bit. Yeah.
Alright, so the introitus is the entryway for where you would have penetrative sex, where menstrual blood would come out, and any sort of, I suppose, pregnancies or things that come out of pregnancies. They all come out of this spot, which is also nice and sparkly.
Oh, wow.
Yes! Do not put glitter in there.
Definitely not.
It's a bad idea. Alright, so you have your introitus, and that's where penetrative sex can occur, and obviously further back is your cervix, but you can't see that so well from the outside without certain sort of tools, I suppose, for things like your pap smears, etc. Inside the introitus is two excellent glands, and they are called the Bartholin glands. I know.
Such fun names.
Yeah, small known fact, everything in the vagina is named after cis men. Doesn't that bring you joy?
That is literal garbage.
So the Bartholin glands, though, are a lot of fun. They're just inside the introitus, and they are what creates a lot of that excess mucus, particularly if you are highly lubricated because you are aroused, or if you are ovulating as well. That's where that extra fun stuff comes from. Yeah. Lastly, I want to talk about our perineum, which is between. Now, I have a feeling that on our beautiful pussy here, it's a little bit closer than maybe what it might be on you, but that's okay.
Sorry, not as factually accurate as we could get.
Who'd have thunk? So we have the perineum, which sits between the introitus we were talking about earlier and the anus.
Oh, I know a thing or two about the anus, honey.
It's your pussy at the back. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is what's between those two. And your perineum can be quite small to up to 2 inches. Everybody's a little different, would you believe?
Really? No, actually.
Yeah.
It's going to be the tagline for this entire video. Everybody's body's different. Ask for consent.
Yeah, and so I think that pretty much covers the vast majority of what you can see from the outside of my favorite part of my body.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk a little bit more about some genitals that we're both a little bit more familiar with.
Speak for yourself.
The penis.
Yeah, okay, so obviously I mean, maybe not obviously, but I don't have one of these. I am, however, relatively familiar with them, and we've done a bit of science and due diligence on this one as well. So we're going to talk about what we can see predominantly from the outside, just like we did with the vulva. There are obviously a few more things on the inside, but we're going to leave them out just for the moment. So first off, we're going to start with the root, which is right at the base of the shaft. And then of course the shaft is the length of it here, and you move forward to the glands. Oh, just tucked in.
Tight foreskin.
It's a problem.
It can be.
Alright, so your foreskin, in people who are uncircumcised, the foreskin actually goes right from the back all the way to the front. And usually covers the glands as well.
Such a cute little turtleneck.
Oh, I don't like that. Okay. So there are 3 blood-filled sinuses, essentially, inside the penis. 2 of them move down the shaft, and then 1 surrounds the urethra. And that's what becomes filled when a person with a penis becomes sexually stimulated. And it's why they become harder or bigger. Although some are showers and some are growers. Everybody is a little different. Everybody's different.
Everybody's different. Just like every other muscle in your body, it can change size and it can change shape as well.
Yeah. And so we're going to move to other things that we can see on the outside now, which is, thank you very much, Toni, is we have the testicles down here. Now the testicles are on the inside, otherwise this on the outside is helping change climate. It's keeping the semen or the sperm inside at a good temperature to allow for creation of more and healthy semen. In most people, the left testicle sits lower than the right one. And they will change, contract, or extend depending on the temperature or if somebody feels a little bit.
That's why drag's so much easier in winter.
It's true. One of the excellent parts in terms of terminology around the penis and testicle area, a little bit poignant at the moment, is an area called the corona, and that is an aspect that connects here, the base, to the base of the shaft as well. I thought you might like that too.
It's a pretty fun term.
Now, you have a favourite area of the penis more specifically.
Indeed, I do. Believe it or not, the prostate is actually a part of the penis as well. It's the internal part of the shaft at the back of your body, essentially. So it kind of connects to the end of the shaft. The shaft goes inside your body and kind of rubs up against your anal cavity. And that is why some people have pleasure from anal sex.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, sounds like fun.
When it comes to a little bit more internal, although I did say we'd skip a lot of it, another aspect that is important is an area called the seminal vesicles. And they are what creates a lot of the fluid that allows for semen to move from here, out the shaft and out your urethra. I should also mention the urethra is right here at the tip of the glands. And in people who have penises, the urethra does two jobs.
Yeah.
In people with vaginas, the urethra only carries urine, whereas in people with penises, it is both urine and semen.
It kind of swaps out depending on what you're using it for.
Yeah, and the urethra is a rifled shape, which is kind of cool.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah, so it means
Fun little
that
fact.
semen can come out faster, but it also impacts how urine comes out as well.
And that brings us to the end of our section about genital anatomy. So thank you, Layla, and thanks to our junk.
You're welcome.
Now we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can clean your junk in a safe and healthy way. So we're going to start off with Layla and her vulva.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, so vulvas are pretty spectacular in that, for the most part, they're self-cleaning. In fact, the more you do, the more unhappy, the more unhappy your vulva will probably be. But that's not to say that it doesn't necessarily need a bit of a rinse now and then. And the best way to do that is just with water. In fact, don't use soap at all if you can help it. If you feel for some reason that you must use soap, try to use one that's pH neutral, which means it won't throw out the balance of the bacteria that naturally exists there. The positive is what we're talking about. That's what you want to keep going. So when you are rinsing it under water, not piping hot water, because it is very sensitive skin. And what you want to do is remove some of that stuff that builds up over time. This is mostly just some of that mucus that we were talking about before, the mucus membranes, and it just builds up because you get warm and sweaty, and that's perfectly normal. If, of course, it is not something that you're used to, or it is different to what is normally there, then that's something that needs sort of visiting and maybe talking to a doctor about.
Definitely. If you feel comfortable going to your GP, then you definitely should. If not, you can always talk to our friends at the Sexual Health Clinic at Canberra Hospital.
Yeah, but ultimately, for regular cleaning, rinsing with water is perfectly fine. I do have a cloth here, but ultimately, I'm not gonna lie, it's probably easier to just use your hands. You're introducing far less. You can open her up a little bit and make sure that you're rinsing everything out. And that's all you really need to do. In fact, don't do anything else.
Wonderful. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about the penis. Now, when you're washing your penis, it is a little bit easier than washing something like your vulva. You don't have to worry about a delicate pH balance. The general recommendation is to lather up your penis, scrotum, and your booty hole every time that you shower or bathe generally. As well as that, can you hold the back of this for me, please, Layla? If you are uncircumcised, you're going to want to very gently...
Unlike what you're doing here.
Yeah. It's okay, it's not attached. You're going to want to very gently pull back your foreskin to show off the glands and remove anything like smegma or any dirt or sweat or some particulate from your underwear that may have built up over the course of the day. Now, when it comes to things like odor removal, you definitely don't want to listen to those sites that say use things like rubbing alcohol around your genitals, because I don't know about you, but have you ever got hand sanitizer on like an open cut on your hand? Imagine that, but on your junk.
Oh no.
Not a fun time, right? Burning, and not in a good way.
What? No.
No, no, definitely not. That being said, you do you. When it comes to things like hair removal though, there are a fair few options for us. The main things that come to mind are things like laser hair removal, shaving, and of course, waxing. When it comes to your genitals, the way that your hair is presented is completely up to you in every way. If you don't feel comfortable shaving, waxing, using laser or a hair removal cream, then you definitely don't have to. And if anyone's trying to make you, then they can fuck off.
Absolutely.
When it comes to things like shaving and waxing, it is highly recommended that you do wash yourself beforehand. Be sure to lather up any areas that you need to and scrub them nice and gently. This will open up the hair follicles and make it a little bit easier and help you avoid things like ingrown hairs. When it comes to things like waxing, be sure that you do have a little bit of a higher pain threshold as well. Some areas like right above the shaft of your penis or on the mons of your vulva can actually be quite painful if you haven't experienced it before or you do have a lower pain threshold as well.
Although if you communicate that to the person who's doing it, they usually take pretty good care of you as well. Something to be aware of when we are talking about introduction of bacteria and keeping the balance is little micro cuts. When you shave, you do introduce tiny little microscopic cuts. We can't really see them, but certainly it means that there is an easier pathway for bacteria to gain entrance to your more sensitive parts. So certainly just keep an eye on things as you go.
Definitely. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the big D, douching. All of the research that I've done into douching over the past couple of weeks putting together this video basically says that you probably shouldn't. But I know what some of you queer people are like and some of you are going to want to. So let me tell you how to do it as safely as you possibly can without the use of a professional. When it comes to things like your vaginal pH levels, it is highly recommended that you do not douche at all. You can flush out any of the bacteria that is helping the health of your vagina, and it can also have a negative effect on the pH levels as well. If you are going to be douching though, be sure that you douche with a lukewarm water. Most recommendations say make sure that it is not super warm to the touch and then turn it down in heat substantially still. You don't want to be burning anything on the inside of your body. The same thing comes when you are douching your anus. Thing with that though is we don't have a pH level per se, as much as we do have some healthy bacteria and gut flora that can actually help in your digestive tract. If you flush all of that bacteria out, then it can actually be a really bad time. So it's recommended if you are anally douching, you should be using something that isn't tap water. Specifically, it's recommended you get something like saline, which is present in your body and a little bit less impactful to that bacteria.
And that would be because tap water is chlorinated, right?
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the takeaway is there's a lot of parts of your body that are perfect just the way that they are.
Yeah, and also shit happens, literally and figuratively. Put down a towel. Like, come on people, put down a towel. Anyway, I think that's all we have to talk about when it comes to these cute little guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, well, thanks for coming. Once again, this is the incomparable Layla Bounce, and here we have our junk. Say bye, junk.
Bye.
Now that we've gotten up close and personal with our junk, it's time to talk a little bit more about staying safe. Now, as a sexually active person, it's my job to make sure that myself and my sexual partners are as safe as possible. And that means talking a little bit about preventative measures. As you may have heard in school or potentially at home, the best way to prevent an STI or a sexually transmitted infection is through abstinence. But if you're a person who has sex, or a person who likes sex, or a person who wants to have sex, or a person who is currently having sex while watching this video, then that's probably not going to be the best advice for you. Most STIs are caused by bacterial or viral infections, and other than keeping your pants on, there are plenty of ways of actually preventing them. And doing your due diligence as a sexy person who wants to have some sexy sex with some other sexy people. The best thing you can do is to be open and honest with your partners. Before you get down and dirty, sit down and have a conversation about your sexual history. Like, how many partners have you had or do you currently have? Have you ever had an STI, and what preventative measures work best for you? It's a little bit awkward, but it is definitely a practice worth getting into. When it comes time to actually take your clothes off, some preventative measures may actually already be pretty familiar to you. Things like condoms and dental dams. For those of you who don't know, a condom is a thin pouch of latex designed to create a physical barrier between your genitals and the insides of a person's body. These are mostly recommended for things like penetrative sex, specifically vaginal, anal, and oral intercourse. Condoms are currently available in two models, a male model and a female model. The most common model available is the male model, which is put over the top of the penis, like so. Open the condom gently, not with your teeth, never with your teeth. Make sure it's got the little sticky outy bit the right way, boop, and then you get your penis. or in this case, a dildo. Roll it over the top very gently and slowly pull it down like so until we're fully covered. And look at that, a mostly protected penis. Anywho, male condoms in and of themselves are around 98% effective when used correctly, although if they are used incorrectly or are in any way, shape or form faulty, they may only be 88% effective, as they could break and not catch all of the bodily fluids they're trying to protect you from. Now, there is also a female condom, as you can see here. Now, the female condom has 2 flexible rings, one at each end, and is designed to be put either inside a vagina or an anus. Essentially, it has the same process. You create a physical barrier between your genitals and any other bodily fluids from the other person. Now, I would demonstrate how to insert that one, but we are on YouTube after all, and I definitely think that would be a little bit too graphic. Anyway, so here's a photo of how it should theoretically work. Female condoms are around 95% effective if used correctly, but unfortunately, mistakes happen. So Family Planning Victoria says they're around 79% effective if they slip out of place or are used in an incorrect manner. A dental dam is another physical barrier that can help prevent the spread of STIs through oral sex. As most safe sex measures focus specifically on penetrative sex, you may not have actually heard of a dental dam before. Personally, I know that I hadn't. A dental dam can help prevent the spread of syphilis, gonorrhea, chlamydia, hepatitis, and HIV by creating a physical barrier which reduces your risk of sharing fluids during oral sex. Apparently, they're really good for eating out too, so if you're a bit squeamish, you might want to check those out. The main issue with dental dams is their lack of general availability. You may not be able to find them at your local chemist, doctor's office, or servo. If you can find them though, best practice is to get a little bit of lube between the dental dam and your skin and hold it in place over the orifice that's being replace the dam if it breaks or tears as well. If you're keen to try out a dental dam, you might be able to find them on this side here, or there are some DIY versions that you can find here. Another STI prevention is the use of PrEP or PEP. Now these are a pre or a post-exposure prophylaxis medication, which can be used to prevent the spread of HIV. If you're worried at all that you may have contracted HIV from a partner or have had a condom break and you just want to be safe, you can head to your local emergency room and they can help you out with a few days worth of doses before you can head to your nearest sexual health clinic or sexual health professional. That being said, the best preventative there is being proactive. Be sure to get tested regularly, even if you do have regular sexual partners or in a close relationship, and use a combination of preventative measures when and if you can. There's no such thing as being too safe when it comes to sex. Now, we've spoken a little bit about STI prevention, but of course there is another thing that you may want to prevent, and that is an unwanted pregnancy. That being said, we probably know a fair bit about a fair few of these. We know about things like condoms and also the contraceptive pill. That being said, there are plenty of other options when it comes to things like contraception, and some of those things may not work for you. If you are curious, be sure to talk to your doctor. There are things like IUDs, there are some inserts, certain injections, as well as things like the pill and mini pill as well. Now for today's game, we're using 3 different kinds of lube. We have some water-based lube, we have some oil-based lube, and we have some silicone-based lube. Now we're going to get a little bit of this lube and put it on our fingers, like so. Now that you've got your fingers lubed up and your condom blown up, all you need to do is rub. Now while I'm doing this, my friends are going to lube up their hands as well, and we can get started on the race. We want to see which lube will pop the condom first. Now I can feel the silicone lube starting to dry up a little bit. This is because silicone will actually adhere to the latex and actually cause a little bit of extra friction, which might cause it to pop. Now my girlfriends are still rubbing away, but by the looks of it, we've got an interesting thing happening with our oil-based lube. So, thank you, Toni. And you can see, as we start to rub, it's starting to create a little bit of build-up. And that's because oil gets a little bit funky after a little while. It'll heat up, it'll start to split until it pops. Now with our other 2 condoms broken, you can see that our water-based lube isn't doing too much. Thank you, Layla. It's kind of spread around, but the best part is with water-based lube is it won't actually have much of an effect on the latex at all. If the condom's already a little bit torn, then it might break, but water-based lube should just evaporate over time. And if it does evaporate, be sure to use more. And that's the end of our fun little game. Be sure to play it at home or at the next party that you can have safely with your friends. That being said, unless otherwise specified, it's probably best to use a water-based lube if you are wearing a condom. Now just remember, after you've tied it off, that if someone says their dick's too big for a condom, you should run. Oh hey, don't mind me, just had a quick costume change before we get into our next segment. Now we're going to be talking all about sexual pleasure. Should be fun. Now, scientifically speaking, sexual pleasure is the physical and or psychological satisfaction and enjoyment derived from a solitary or shared erotic experience. Now this can be anything from a thought or a dream to some physical touching or even a little bit of autoeroticism. That being said, pleasure is very different for everyone and you can be stimulated through a lot of different things. One of these things is your erogenous zones. Now we're going to put up a little erogenous zone map just here so we can have a little bit of a look. And I'm going to list a couple of erogenous zones that may be a fun place for you to test out on your own. These places include your genitals, your nipples, your mouth and lips, your neck, your inner thighs, the bottom of your feet and toes, your scalp, your ears, your lower stomach, the small of your back, the inner sides of your arms and your wrists, your palms and your fingertips, and pretty much anywhere else on your body. The thing with erogenous zones is they're not really factual science anymore. We did believe in them for a little while, but the main thing that you can do to figure out what's going to work great for a partner or turn yourself on in any way is to do a little bit of experimentation. So if you can, have a bit of a play on your own or have a bit of a play with your partner. I personally would recommend taking some time, both of you, on your own to find a couple of fun places and then do a little bit of show and tell, if you know what I mean. Believe it or not though, there is some science behind the way we feel when we are getting boned. During the act of sex, your body actually creates endorphins such as dopamine and prolactin, which give positive effects when it comes to feeling pleasure and satisfaction. These endorphins give you the kind of, oh god, I really needed that moment after having a really good fuck. Your body can also release hormones like vasopressin and oxytocin, which have been linked to interpersonal intimacy and pain reduction respectively. Following sex though, your brain creates and releases very specific hormones that make you happy and maybe a little bit sleepy. These are things like serotonin. Basically, if you really need it, your body will actually reward you for having a good fuck. Now we're going to get down and dirty. We're going to talk a little bit about sex. Now, if you were like me and you went to a school that had a sex ed course, then the main kind of intercourse you were probably told about was penile-vaginal sex. That being said, there are plenty of other ways to have sex as well. You can have anal sex, oral sex, you can do some fingering, there's also toys, and completely non-penetrative forms of sexual intercourse as well. Of course, though, the way that you have sex with your partner is going to vary depending on a few different things. The logistics of sex will vary depending on you and your partner's gender identity, the genders that you were assigned at birth, your specific sex organs and body parts, and your relationship with your own body. All of these factors can change how sex works, but I'm going to do my best to try and explain in the plainest of terms the ways that you can have sex as a queer person. Now, of course, we'll start off with penile-vaginal sex. It's a thing, it works. We're gonna have to deal with it, unfortunately. Now, the way that this usually works is a person with a penis will be having sex with a person with a vagina. The penis is inserted into the vaginal canal, and you kind of get the idea. I'm not gonna go into immense detail here. Trust me, you don't want me to. It wouldn't be a fun time for anyone. Also, hi mum. Another form of penetrative intercourse you can have is anal sex. Now, a lot of the time this is immediately thought of as the main way that male and male partners will have sex with each other, but that's not necessarily the case. Now, anal sex is pretty similar to vaginal penile sex in the way that something is inserted into the anal canal and ... you get the gist. That being said, it works well for people who are assigned male at birth and assigned female at birth and people of any and all gender identities. It just, again, depends on you and your own body. Another form of sex that you may have is oral sex. Now, oral sex is specifically when you're using your mouth, I guess is the best way to put it. Now, This is either when you have a penis inserted into your mouth, you're using your mouth to interact with a vagina, or also an anus. Now, all of these things, again, totally normal, completely fine, but when it comes to these kinds of sex, be sure to use protection when you can. Things like condoms and dental dams like we spoke about earlier on in the video. Of course, though, you can have sex in other ways. Some people might use toys or even their own hands. Now, when it comes to things like fingering or the use of toys in sex, it is pretty similar to the other kinds of sex that we have spoken about. Sometimes you'll have toys that are attached to your body in a strap-on kind of situation, or you may be manually inserting them through the use of your hands or other body parts. These penetrative intercourses work very similarly to the other kinds of penetrative intercourse that we've spoken about. You'll have a toy, or potentially your fingers, being inserted into the vaginal canal or the anal canal. Once again, when it comes to this kind of thing, you do need to be safe. Now, not necessarily talking about protection, but if you are using things like toys, make sure that they are of the right size. If you are using your hands, be sure that you have trimmed and filed your nails, because you definitely don't want any cuts happening inside, if you catch my drift. That being said, if you are going to be using things like toys, be sure that you're using a correct kind of lubricant. For example, a lot of toys will be recommended for use with something like a silicone-based lubricant, because other kinds of lubricants such as oil or water-based may actually break down what the toy is made out of, and it's not a fun time. Now, there are plenty of types of non-penetrative sex as well that I could talk about, but we'd be here for a pretty long time. Personally, I don't believe that sex is just the act of penetration, be it with anything that we've spoken about so far. It's a bit more about the interpersonal relationship between you and your sexual partner or partners. It could be whatever you make of it, really. And that's where things like some kinks come in. You don't necessarily have to be penetrated in order to have an intensely erotic time. And you don't necessarily need to be penetrated in order to have sex. Okay, before we get started with this one, I want to give you all a quick warning. We're going to be talking a little bit about kinks and fetishes. If kinks and fetishes are a specific trigger for you, or this is just something that you don't really want to listen to, I'm going to put a timestamp right here. Head over to this time, and you will not have to listen to anything that we're about to talk about. That being said, how do I look? Give him a second. I feel pretty. Hopefully everyone's gone by now who doesn't want to be listening to this. Kinks and fetishes are a thing. Scientifically speaking, unfortunately, there's not actually very much research into the science of sex because it's kind of still a taboo topic even today. That being said, there has been some research done, but none of it is 100% conclusive. When it comes to things like kinks and fetishes, we have a few theories about what makes us tick, specifically when it comes to things that make us go yum, that make other people go yuck. That being said, it's not like the theory of gravity or evolution. We don't have as much hard evidence that make us go, yes, this one theory is the thing. So I'm going to list a couple of these theories now and give you a pretty quick explanation, and hopefully I might be able to explain a little bit about why you feel the way you feel about a few specific things. Now, the first theory we're going to look at is something called brain overlap theory. Brain overlap theory essentially states that there are areas in your brain that control your sexual body parts and impulses, but they are located alongside parts of your brain that control other appendages and emotions. The thing with that is, we know that our brain can communicate with different parts of itself, creating kind of an overlap or a network. This is where overlap theory comes in. If certain parts of your body are being stimulated, then that part of your brain that affects that part of the stimulation could also be interacting with the part that controls sexual pleasure or just any kind of pleasure. And that interconnection in and of itself could theoretically lead to a fetish or a kink, or just something that turns you on that may not turn on other people. A study out of the University of California in San Diego actually helps give a little bit more weight to this theory. In fact, there was a little bit of research done showing that crosstalk between the areas of the brain that control both the feet and the genitals are quite close to each other, which may lead to things like foot fetishes. The next theory that we're going to talk about is called the Pavlovian theory. Now, this theory is a little bit older. The research was done in the 1960s. Specifically, a bunch of men were shown images of naked women and military boots. Over a course of time, the men started to get the same sexual desire from the naked images as they did to the images of the boots. So So this theory essentially gives us the idea that if you're exposed to something repeatedly in a somewhat sexual or erotic context, in theory, you may develop a fetish towards it. If you have a sexual experience and there's, for example, a cacti nearby, and this is something that happens frequently, even the vision of seeing a cacti just out in the street or in Bunnings or something might give you a little bit of a sexual urge. Again, we're not too sure that this theory is the theory to be going by, but it can give a little bit more insight through this research. The third theory that we're going to look at when it comes to kinks and fetishes is something called the gross out theory. Now, the gross out theory essentially says when you're in a high state of sexual arousal, your disgust impulse weakens. And this weakening disgust impulse could, in theory, get you to do a few more sexual things. This theory also heavily relies on the fact that some research says that people who have a heightened state of sexual arousal will have a different perception of the world. People with incredibly high sex drives but don't have a partner nearby could attach that sexual feeling to some things nearby, therefore creating fetishes or kinks. The final theory when it comes to kinks and fetishes is something called the pain theory. Now, research shows that sexual pleasure and pain both involve the same release of brain chemicals and neurotransmitters, specifically endorphins and serotonin. Endorphins and serotonin will have a similar effect on the brain, be it in a sexual way or in a pleasurable way, which could lead more people to have these releases of endorphins during things like rough sex or some more physical, non-sexual acts. Always be sure when you are doing anything a little bit kinky or exploring a potential kink or fetish that you and your partner are both happy and enthusiastically consenting to everything that is going on. Well, it's been a big night of drag and science, and I would like to thank you all so much for tuning in. As well as you guys, though, we do have a few other people to thank, namely National Science Week, Inspiring Australia, Phish and Phreak Productions, Barbara Setnikar, Layla Bounce, and everyone who's watching this right now. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you next time.
Bye!